and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and joining me is my co-host, Billy Brant. On this week's episode, we'll go over some headlines in the world of mixed martial arts. We're also going to break down World Series of Fighting 25, Bellator 146, and of course, we are going to recap UFC Fight Night Monterrey. Also, to end the show, we're going to pick the main cards for the first ever UFC fight in Seoul, South Korea, with Ben Henderson taking on Jorge Masvidal for the main event of the evening. Once again, I'm Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. He is Billy Brant. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrant21. And how's it going this week, Billy?
You know, I'm still adjusting to living in a Holly home world.
That is true. And also, we have Thanksgiving tomorrow. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there. And hopefully you enjoy the holiday with your friends and family.
Especially Johnny Hendricks.
Well, this is coming on the news of him leaving the Team Takedown that he's a part of, seeking a new camp. And also the report is that he's also trying to seek another match with Tyron Woodley. That will probably happen somewhere down the road, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
No, I think they're still giving Woodley that shot. So he'll probably be backed up for a while. Maybe I don't know what fight you can get in there. That division's pretty booked up right now when you got Rory and
Hector Lombard is supposed to be
coming
happening,
back,
right?
and then you got Woodley with the shot. So I don't know where Hendricks goes from here, really, after all that big fiasco with the weight cut either, I don't think.
Possibly the guy we'll talk about here in just a few minutes who is winning in a main event, Mr. Neil Magny, could even be a guy that may get a big boost up the rankings.
That'd be huge, but it's possible, man. You keep winning main events and you keep stepping up to the plate.
I mean, when you fight 5 times back-to-back years and you only lose one of those fights
against a Damian Maia, it's not like Neil Magny. We'll talk about it later. He's
right
at another level right now.
All right, a couple of news and notes here for headlines. Nothing too major, but our good friend of the show, the karate hottie, Michelle Watterson, we're disappointed, so I'm assuming she has to feel disappointed. She got hurt up ahead of her fight on the undercard of UFC 194 against Tecia Torres, where it was either possibly she would get a shot at the title with a win or maybe one more fight. But they're looking for a replacement for Tecia, trying to think of people. Of course, Joanne Calderwood had to pull out of her fight a few months ago. I believe that was supposed to be, I'm blanking. Actually, you know what? She probably won't. I just realized it was supposed to be December 10th against Paige Van Zandt. So 2 days later against Tecia Torres, probably not going to work out. So obviously with Rose stepping in to fill JoJo's void, there goes Rose Namajunas. Randa Marcos already has a fight scheduled against Carolina Kowalczyk on the December 19th card. So probably unlikely one of those two get moved off. Jessica Pene's out there. She hasn't done anything since losing to Joanna Jacek, so that's maybe a possibility. Also, I know it's coming off a loss, but I still think Marina Moroz is one of the top girls in this division, even though she lost to Valerie Returno a couple months ago. That could possibly be a matchup there. Am I missing anybody in the top ranks that could maybe take on Tecia?
Basically took all the names that could. I don't know if they'll be able to fill this.
Jessica Aguilar? Because she trains in it's in I forgot, this is the one in Vegas. But I know she's coming off a loss, but she's a highly rated fighter in her own.
The fight's in what, 12 days?
December 12th, so we got 3 weeks ish.
All right, that's a little farther back than I thought. Yeah, I don't know if they can find some of that time. Honestly, I think they'll just reschedule this fight.
You know what could happen, and Tecia said this when they had the fight night in Boston last time. She's originally from Massachusetts and would like to fight on that Boston card. So I wonder if there's any chance maybe they find her a new opponent but push it to the Boston card and have her fight in her hometown.
Something like that could make more sense. Maybe, when is the Boston card exactly?
January 17th.
So maybe a lot of those names could open up in that time. So that's probably a better option, honestly. And I'm just happy that when I see an injury at UFC 194, I'm never happy to see anyone get pulled off the card, but I was a little worried about this one.
Now, looking at a article here on SheerDog.com, it is a unspecified injury that has forced Michelle out. I think the fact it's unspecified to me means it's a minor injury, but it was enough of an injury to not cause her to not fight. So I got to believe that Waterson probably could fight as early as that Boston card, perhaps. So I'm sure that's something they're looking for as well. But if they can find an immediate replacement to keep Tisha on the 194 card, then of course I think they will.
Yeah, I would like to see someone like Jessica Penne. I feel like she's been sitting out for a while now here, so that's probably a good.
Because that was back in June.
Yeah, it was a while back, and I honestly haven't seen her name at all pop up for any fight. So I got to imagine she's ready to go, get back in there after that fight.
All right. In other news, big matchup announced for the UFC on Fox, returning back to Newark. I think it will probably serve as the co-main event. It'll probably usurp Tarek Saffiedine against Jake Ellenberger, but a big matchup in the heavyweight division. Some people thought, well, Ben Rothwell, he didn't get that fight against Stipe. Stipe kind of lands Andrei Arlovski in what appears to be, a bigger matchup than Ben Rothwell. But Ben Rothwell ends up getting a pretty solid matchup of his own. He takes on former UFC champion Josh Barnett. And I think that will probably serve as the co-main event. And kind of with all these matchups in heavyweight and the fact the heavyweight division is kind of on hold with Verdum wanting to take a break, it could end up being the winner of Barnett and Rothwell takes on the winner of Arlovski and Stipe. And we could end up seeing Stipe Rothwell anyway.
Could you? I mean, I just can't imagine. Even if you look at if Arlovski wins, I thought he was going to get a title shot after the Brown fight. Now he has to take 2-3 more fights. I mean, this heavyweight division is really backed up, and it's kind of crazy. But it's very well likely that is what happens, and I think it probably will. And it kind of stinks, but at the same time, you at least get a true contender out of the deal.
For sure, and that's a big matchup there. Josh Barnett coming off a big victory over Roy Nelson over in Japan. Rothwell, of course, has been on a streak as of late. We didn't get to see him against Stipe about a month ago in Dublin, but now gets a chance to see if he's actually still relevant and taking on a very solid competitor in Josh Barnett.
Yeah, I think Stipe still he's got the better end of the deal here. But Rothwell, for how backed up it is, this is probably the best possible fight he could get in Barnett, and it is a huge matchup nonetheless. So I'm really excited, and I think that Newark card, for being a Fox card, really needed this.
It did. You and I were talking. We're like, oh, should we fly out there again? And we're like, I don't know. And now they add this one, and there's still probably yet to be some big-time fights added, is my hope, especially with a lot of guys, training between the Frankie Edgar camp. We could see an Enson Barbosa pop up, or even some of those guys that train with Sarah Longo. We saw a lot of those guys in the card. We could still see a Gian Vellante pop up as well. So still a lot of I'm probably missing some East Coast guys there, but probably could see more of those guys pop up as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like we were saying, for being a Fox card, I was kind of worried for a minute here when you got the Fox Sports 1 title fight there. So, but they're adding a lot to this card, and I'm excited. I think they will add another big name, and then maybe it will be worth it to go out there.
All right, let's get to World Series of Fighting. This kicks off our 3-fight weekend here for the world of mixed martial arts. Of course, they did their one-night 8-man tournament where the eventual winner would end up, semifinalists would have to fight 3 times in one night to get a shot, just a title shot
just
at
to get
Justin
Gaethje. By Gaethje.
Yeah. So looking at the tournament, we already kind of mentioned before, they actually didn't show the quarterfinal round on the televised card. So when the broadcast came on, we were already in the semifinals. But kind of going over some of the results, we had Ramil Mustafaev defeated. That was the first fight of the night. Was not part of it. My apologies. Islam Mamedov defeated Jorge Patino. Then we had Mike Ricci defeat Joe Condon. Then we had João Zeffirino defeat Brian Foster, and Luis Palomino defeat Richard Pachinuk. So after all this happened, Mike Ricci, with the head kick knockout that he got over Condon in the first round, actually broke his foot, so he could not continue into the next round. And also the guy who won, Islam Mamedov, against Jorge Patino, he couldn't go after defeating Patino in a 5-round unanimous decision. So Patino and then as well as Brian Foster get called up as the 2 losers who were able to go and still in good condition. So Foster ends up taking on Palomino in one semifinal, and we have Zeffirino ends up taking on Patino in another final. So that's kind of how it works out there. And this is one of the problems kind of with this tournament. And another unfortunate thing is because none of this was filmed. We didn't see it. It kind of just like, oh, this is now how it is. It seems somewhat a little hokey or fake, or maybe even staged. The fact we didn't get to see that quarterfinal round, and especially with World Series of Fighting already have some allegations of collusion and whatnot with their matchmaker also being a manager with a lot of their fighters.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good. And we talked about this going in with these tournaments. I mean, when the first round and two of the losers make it up to the second round immediately, I mean, it's tough to pull these things off. I did see the Richie KO. That was very nice, but it sucks for him. That was my pick. Dang it, Richie. Why you got to break your foot? But, I mean, at the end of the day, when we get to the final of this tournament, I think it worked out for a very exciting night, and it was a really cool story just watching how it happened. But these things are just too tough to do nowadays to really get people to just keep going through and fight. I mean, like you see the first round, you already lose 2 competitors.
I think if they're going to do something like this again, just keep it to 4 guys. Don't worry about 8. I think that's very complicated. And then you have the winner potentially fighting 7 rounds in one day. And then, like you said, you're probably going to get injuries again. And then they had to do a thing like Bellator. You couldn't do the elbows up until the final round and stuff. So a valid attempt, I think, but just stick to 4 guys if you're going to do the one night.
Yeah, I love it that they try it, and I love the tournament format, but it's kind of showing now through and through with Bellator, it's just not happening.
Right, and Bellator, like they were running the 8-man basically over 3 months. Well, and even that, how many injuries did we see?
But I'm saying even in Bellator's 4-man, look at the injuries.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Mamedov and Ricci probably get a shot against each other. Yeah. You know, they'll still be in the organization. So moving on to the semifinal round, very exciting fight between Luis Palomino and Brian Foster. Both guys, of course, that's Luis Palomino's style, just going at it. And Brian Foster, most of the time, much to oblige, but he mixed in some nice takedowns, got on top, and just started pounding on Palomino, and eventually got the stop there in the second round at the 4:19 marker.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great win for him. You come in there and you get that stoppage late in it for being the tournament rules. So, I don't know. I really like this, but this whole thing's kind of frustrating me how it worked out now, thinking about World Series of Fighting and how they work their fights.
And then Zeffirino, pretty much what he did to Brian Foster in the first fight, was able to get a quick that 50-50 position, roll and get the heel hook and get Patino to tap very quickly in the first round. So heading into the finals, Zeffirino was able to get 2 wins, 2 submissions, and fight less than 3 minutes.
This was really impressive for him. I mean, to be able to go out there and under 3 minutes get 2 clean submissions, I mean, you go into that final probably fresher than anyone.
And then what did you think of the one non-tournament fight? They had Jason High, who used to fight in the UFC, as well as Estevan Payan, who fought in the UFC. High ends up getting the knockout victory in the second round. Even though he wasn't in the tournament, I think with that kind of emphatic victory, he's probably got to factor in after the eventual winner, we'll get to in just a second, takes on Justin Gaethje in their lightweight division.
Yeah, being big on this card and then getting a big knockout. Obviously not being a ton in the tournament, so he'll probably be in line a little bit, but he'll definitely be thrown in that mix. I mean, maybe even you see guys like Ricci and them that have a fight to come.
In the main event, we got a rematch. Brian Foster against João Zeffirino. Didn't go the way the first one went. And Brian Foster, you know, they were mentioning this on the broadcast. It's not like he had a couple weeks to prepare for the rematch and reassess how he got caught in this submission. They're like, his jiu-jitsu skills are the same as they were, 2 hours ago. So it's all about mental toughness and just physical strength. And Brian Foster, I think, just kind of willed himself to beating Zeffirino, to getting out of these submissions, getting out. He was put in a couple bad spots in this fight. But one reason I picked him for this tournament, Billy, was because I thought his power could be the difference. He had that changing power I thought that some of these other guys didn't have. And I think it proved as the power just kept on coming. And then finally he floored João Zeffirino. Thought he won the fight, had his hands up, but then threw a couple more before the referee, Chris Tognani, came in and finally stopped this one in the second round, the 251 marker. And for him to lose in such a very disappointing fashion, a first-round heel hook in about 1:30, to come back and be able to beat that guy and knock him out and end up, fighting 3 times in one night. I tell you what, I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with against Justin Gaethje, and I think we're going to see a fight that could rival his 2 fights with Luis Palomino. We're going to see a very excellent fight whenever this may happen.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you think how fresh Zeffirino was, like we said, with those 2 submissions, so he's basically the same. Foster goes on, gets submitted, and then goes to a war with Palomino. I mean, and then to come out and get a huge knockout over him after he already lost to him, like, I don't know where you're at mentally when this guy's already submitted you. He's way fresher now, and you can come out there and pull that off. This is very impressive, and it does get me really excited. Even though we joke around like, oh, you got to fight Gaethje now, it makes me really excited, and that's going to be a really good fight.
And Brian Foster's a guy that's had a very kind of tumultuous career. He actually had a pretty solid run in the UFC. He went 3-2. In fact, he even beat Matt Brown here in Detroit. And then I think he had some injury problems. He actually left the organization, fought in kind of some really small shows for a while before finally getting picked up by Titan for one fight where he defeated a good guy in Gilbert Smith. Since then, he's fought for World Series of Fighting dating back to earlier this year. And with this tournament, has already fought 5 times for them. He did lose to Jake Shields, but again, that was at 170. Since he's at 155, 3-1 with just that loss to Zeffirino. His other 3 wins coming by way of knockout. I think at 155, he's a force to be reckoned with, and he's a guy that, like I said, with kind of that dip he had to take in from leaving the UFC and fighting on little shows, for him to come back and make it into a big-time organization, you can't help but root for this guy.
Yeah, we've seen like similar stories before where when you leave, it's really hard to get back in the sport. And I mean, to be able to do that, and now as amazing as that tournament was, win that in the Gaethje fight, like you're saying, it's going to be hard not to root for this guy and pull for him, and I think I will be.
Let's move on to Bellator 146 from Thackerville, Oklahoma. First fight of the night, 205 pounds, Guillermo Viana against Houston Alexander. Did Viana get the win in this fight, Billy?
I mean, this was bad for Houston Alexander.
Here's the thing. It was bad for Houston, but the reason I asked that question is because Viana got the win, but I felt he could have done better. Did he batter Houston Alexander? Did the fight get stopped justifiably so at the end of the second round? Yes, but after battering that guy, not be able to put him away, not showing a great gas tank, just how do you expect to compete against some of the top guys in the division, like a King Mo, like a Phil Davis, like an Emmanuel Newton, when you can barely finish Houston Alexander, who's like 40 years old and is like a 500 fighter? And it's just, I don't know if he just had a bad weight cut that day or something, but yeah, he got the win, but you also got to look at the downside. Viana's got some work to do if he wants to compete with some of these top guys in this division.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there in saying it doesn't look impressive when you go and match him up with the top guys. But on this night, I mean, there's no denying he battered Houston Alexander. He deserves that. But when you're going to match him forward, it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, he's going to be a real threat to these top-tier guys.
The next fight of the evening was Chide Nakajuwani, who's the brother of Anthony Nakajuwani, against Ricky Rainey. Very close fight here. Surprised it ended up going to unanimous decision. I actually thought Rainey took the first and third rounds, with Nakajuwani taking the second round. And really, to me, it was just the pressure of Rainey moving forward, being in Nakajuwani's face, and Nakajuwani not really answering too much. Yeah, he threw some powerful blows, probably even threw the more impactful blows in this fight, but they were few and far between. But I guess he did enough damage, and also that him messing with the eye there, I think maybe swayed the judges in giving him the nod over Rainey in this one.
Yeah, this is a close one. This is one where I'm not too mad either way. I wouldn't have been like, oh, that's the biggest rivalry. I think it was a close fight. For Rainey, as much as you take away a loss, but I think it was a good comeback fight. I mean, he's coming off that Michael Page fight, I think was his last fight, which was a really tough fight for him. And, yeah, it's tough to say how to score this one, but like I said, it's not one of those ones where I'm going to be too outraged either way. It was really close.
Yeah, and for Rainey, it's just one of those things where I think if he was on top a little more, I think that might have gave him the nod. He was in the clinch a lot. And obviously, like we said, the damage thing. Even though Nakajuwani wasn't throwing a lot, he was throwing the more impactful strikes, and that kind of has a sway with the judges as well.
Yeah, when you land them big shots, I mean, honestly, in MMA, it's weird because even like, we'll get to it later, the Magny Gassman fight, I think. I'll talk more into this, but you see where some fighter will win 3 rounds, but one guy had way closer to finishing, or he has them shots, so it's really hard to judge.
The next fight of the evening was renowned wrestler Bubba Jenkins as he took on Jordan Parsons. Very close fight. I actually thought it was a pretty entertaining fight, and he did get the win, that being Bubba Jenkins. But even if he would have got the loss, I thought he showed pretty improved stand-up skills. We haven't really seen this from Bubba Jenkins so far in his run here in Bellator as he keeps a good record now, 10-2. 2-0 since losing to Georgie Karakanian, who's shot up the rankings there in their featherweight division, very close to a shot. But I think Bubba Jenkins is a guy that he can get maybe 2 more victories under his belt. He can probably maybe crack a shot at the title there. And Jordan Parsons was very game, did a good job for the most part, stuffing the takedown. I think he clearly lost that first frame. And then rounds 2 and 3 were very close, and I went to split decision. I think it could have went either way. And actually, I probably would have scored the fight for Jordan Parsons, to be honest. I thought he was going to get the nod, but I think those takedowns and the pressure of the takedowns in this one is what maybe swayed the judges to give it to Bubba Jenkins.
Yeah, and I remember, what was it, round 2? I think Jenkins had him really rocked.
I'm sorry. I want to, so I think I mixed that up. I wanted Parsons round 1, Jenkins round 2, and then Parsons round 3. And
right.
I think the judges, that's right. I think I was getting my fights confused there between Rainey and Nakajwani. But yes, he had Jenkins almost had the fight finished. Definitely, for sure took round 2. There was no doubt about that.
That's the round that swayed me this fight, but it also disappointed me in a little bit in Jenkins. Like, his stand-up was showing he rocked him big, but then he kind of went into wrestler mode, and I think it kind of stopped him from getting the finish. But it was, like we said, a great fight for Jenkins. It showed a lot of improvements in his stand-up, and man, I'm excited to see where he goes from here. I would have liked to see him just stay back and use his hands a little more, and probably could have got that finish, but he did what he had to do to get the win.
Speaking of getting finishes, our next 2 fights definitely delivered. Brandon Gertz against Derek Campos. Gertz finally got his rematch against Campos, as we mentioned. It was supposed to happen one of the tournaments, I believe, actually 2 years ago, and finally it materialized here. And Gertz, if getting how quickly he got the finish maybe shows how badly he wanted this fight. Is he was started kind of in a low stance for a lot of this fight, was looking in, and then just all of a sudden, boom, a straight right to the face of Derek Campos, sent some crashing to the canvas, and that was all she wrote. As Jason Herzog had to come in and stop this one 37 seconds into the first round. And if you thought his win against maybe Melvin Gillard was a fluke, I mean, a guy that doesn't have a lot of knockouts to his credit. I believe this was actually only his 2nd career knockout, to then knock out a very tough competitor in Derek Campos in the first round. Very impressive for Gertz, who's now on a nice 3-fight winning streak here for Bellator, and a guy that could factor into the title picture here with another solid victory.
You know what? I was really impressed with Gertz, but now I'm even more impressed because I didn't realize that was only his 2nd KO. To get a win over Melvin Gillard, which is huge, and then come out there and steamroll this guy like this, you're really close to a title shot as far as I'm concerned. 37 seconds, knockout, and then Gillard, you get a decision split, but they brought Melvin Gillard in to destroy.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's something he's finding his power, because of this 3-fight winning streak, both his knockouts have come. So maybe he's now just finally kind of starting to develop all that out there in the Grunge Training Center out there in Colorado.
Yeah, whatever he's doing is for sure working for him, and I really look forward to his next couple fights here, because I think he'll be a big name in this division.
And then another quick knockout happened in the main event between Melvin Manhoef and Hisaki Kato. And boy, once again, Melvin Manhoef proves that he is one of the most dangerous men in MMA. It looked like he was hurt. Kato looked like he was getting the best of him in this fight, being the taller guy, a little bigger, but that's all Manhoef needs is one strike. And when I say strike, a kick, a punch, a knee, an elbow, it really doesn't matter what he throws, he can knock you out with. And kind of just, I think in desperation a little bit, just saw a little bit open. He's like, I'm just going to throw a bomb right here. And boom, Kato goes down. That's all she wrote. And that's just Melvin Manhoef, man. That's just what he does, and he can do that to anybody at 185 pounds.
I jumped out of my seat when this happened, because I'm sitting here like, oh, Manhoef's rocked. He's on the fence here, Kato. And then it looked like Kato just almost stepped back and took one breath, and Manhoef just leaped forward. I think it was a leaping left. And I'm just like, how? Like, it looked like for a split second, Kato stepped off the gas, and Manhoef just landed that left, and it's over. I feel bad for anyone that wants to fight this dude and has to strike with him like that. Manhoef's a monster.
Yes, he is. And the middleweight division is very interesting right now with Halsey not being the champion. We have Carvalho. We think Halsey's probably destined for 205. I think that weight cut's just too much of a toll for him. So it will be interesting to see how kind of all that division plays out, because they could even, honestly, they could make Manhoef against Carvalho as a title fight. They really could.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't know if there's really that much better matchup other than maybe giving Kendall Grove another shot at the title.
Yeah, I like Manhoof better than Grove again, though. I mean, I think it's more exciting, and coming off a huge knockout like this, Cato's coming off a huge knockout over Joe Schilling, so this is still big for Manhoof. I mean, I would like to see that fight more from a fan's perspective.
But we shall see what Bellator decides to do. And speaking of 205, Viana, you should have Viana take on Brandon Halsey at 205. Show him a guy that really pushes the base.
There you go.
Yeah, see if he'll be for real. Because if he could beat Brandon Halsey, you can go, all right, well, maybe he can.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good fight for both of them.
All right, let's get to this weekend's action on the Fight Pass, November 28th. I think it technically will be... actually, I skipped ahead. November 21st, UFC Monterrey. Let's get there first. And let's give it to finish out this weekend's worth of fights. Almost forgot we had a UFC fight.
Yeah, right.
It kind of snuck up on me.
We went like 2 weekends without, but it made up for it this weekend.
I think it was all the decisions that they had on this card. Holy cannoli.
Yeah.
After the first five fights of the evening, which 4 of them saw knockouts, from that point on, starting with the Hector Arena fight, which I believe would have been the 6th fight of the night, all decisions.
Man.
So that's 8 decisions, or not. Well, 4 knockouts. So yeah, 9 decisions overall on the card, but then there was like 8 in a row here.
I will say, at least as far as the main card, a couple of them were exciting fights.
Right.
So it's not too bad, but man, a lot of decisions on this card. You get a Diego Sanchez decision, though. That's never a bad one.
But big wins by Leandro Silva over Efren Escudero. Big win for him. That really shocked us looking at that fight. And it's really surprising, kind of real quickly, just looking over the stats of that one, because Escudero was able to get 2 takedowns and actually outstrike Silva 56-47. But I think the judges maybe were going with the more impactful strikes, is looking at the significant strikes, 35 to just 24 for Escudero. And I think that's what swayed the judges there in Mexico to give it to Buscapé.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this earlier. I mean, big punches are what sway judges. And I mean, it's hard to know. Like, I couldn't say if I was a judge how I would look at it, total strikes or stuff like that. But either way, Silva gets the upset. We both thought Escudero had the edge there, and we thought he was going to take it. So that's a big win for him coming in Escudero's home city.
Scott Jorgensen unfortunately breaks his foot against Alejandro Perez, so he officially goes down as a knockout loss. So very unfortunate for him. Scott Jorgensen, one of the more exciting guys
that was tough to watch
in the bantamweight division. So who knows? That could end up maybe even being a career-ending injury. Who knows? And
yeah,
he's a guy that's kind of towards 500 in his career. He's had a lot of wars going back to his days in the WEC. So that could, I mean, I'm just saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him come back, but that could be a type of thing that makes you think, well, maybe this is it for me, you know?
Yeah, Scott Jorgensen's had a lot. He's had a lot of fights, a lot of wars, all exciting fights too. And I mean, I think his last 5 fights is I don't know, he's not won that many, so I think it might be time to start looking towards.
Yeah, he has not won since June of last year, where he defeated Danny Martinez. Since then, he's lost 3 in a row, and before that win, he had 3 in a row. So he has actually lost 6 of his last 7 fights.
Yeah, so see, that's tough. And then you get a bad injury like this. As much as I love Jorgensen, he's an exciting fighter. He's had a good career. It might be time to look towards something else.
Yeah, and he was born in 82, so he would be 7 years older than me. So he's be 33 years old. I mean, you know, he's not getting any younger.
Yeah, I mean, what more do you do? Do you think you come back and have a title run at this point? I mean, you can't count it out when you've seen Mark Hunt do it, but I think for Jorgensen, it's going to be hard to make that run.
The 2 contract fights, they were all right. I'll put it that way. We got, I was able to get the Montana one correct. Billy, you and I struck out on the Punisher Horacio Gutierrez. You went with Marine there in the welterweight one, which I'm going to be honest, I thought Marine won that one. I'm going to go to that one because I thought that was the more closer one, as Barloza pretty much used great takedowns and was able to stay on top. We saw some bursts there from Gutierrez in the striking, probably was the better striker, but didn't have enough of a ground game yet. I mean, I think he only had 4 pro fights coming into this fight, so he's a guy that I think can develop into a solid fighter, but looking at the one I thought was very close, they ended up giving the edge to Montano. I really thought Enrique had this one. I thought Montano probably won the first round, but then looking kind of as it went on, I thought Marine was getting the better of him, and that I thought that third round was very close, but I think maybe that takedown in the third might have sealed it for him.
Yeah.
There, if you thought the first 2 rounds were either or, which I think you can make a case for, but Montano gets the nod there to be the welterweight champion.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying with this fight, really close fight. Montano, it's close in the first 2, but I think that third one kind of sealed it with the takedown there, and he takes the fight. And these fights happen. They were the the finals for the show, so they were good. And I kind of want them to change how they do this Ultimate Fighter stuff now.
Well, I'm glad that I think for once they stuck the other version of the Ultimate Fighter, the non-US version of the Ultimate Fighter, on like a fight night like this and not like a pay-per-view, kind of like they had for UFC 190, where they threw in those tough Brazil guys on there. So at least in that case, we got it on a fight night when people weren't paying money to see guys who had never fought in the UFC before.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I kind of forgot about doing that on a pay-per-view, so this is a lot better for them.
And it was in Mexico, first time in Monterrey, so I didn't have as big a deal with it. But yeah, that's sometimes you don't know what you're going to get when you have 2 contract fights like that.
And you never know too, because Yair won the last one, and that dude's like the next star probably. I mean, people are really looking into him, so I guess it is all right. But keep it off the pay-per-views for sure.
Big fight here in the flyweight division for the next fight is Henry Cejudo took on Jussier Formiga, and much to maybe everyone's not disappointment but surprise, was the striking of Cejudo. Is that pretty much what won him this matchup? Is he actually outstruck Formiga 71-39? He did mix in 2 takedowns, but really didn't push the issue. Only tried 3 overall. Formiga tried a couple out of desperation just to try to make it a jiu-jitsu match. But I think Formiga, his striking was okay in this fight, but I just think he was surprised at how long Cejudo was standing up and striking with him. And I think because there isn't a lot of tape of him actually striking, it was probably hard to all of a sudden adjust and go, oh, he's not taking me down. I got to now figure this stuff out. And I think that took Formiga for a loop. And I think by the time he started to kind of figure things out there, maybe in the third, I think it was already kind of too late. And Cejudo at that point also proved to be the fresher fighter because the blows he was landing on Formiga, and really, to me, ran away with the third round, outstriking him 33-11. And while it wasn't the most exciting victory, it ended up going down as a split decision. I definitely think that Henry got the win there. And just really because lack of contenders, I think probably does get Mighty Mouse Johnson next.
Yeah, you have to give him the title shot. And I actually really like this fight from him because it kind of shows, like, we all know Cejudo's wrestling background. We know he can wrestle. What happens when he comes up against someone with the jiu-jitsu like Formiga? Well, he'll stand with you and he'll still get the nod. So I think this fight, it was a good one for Cejudo to say, like, hey, I'm not just a wrestler. I can also strike too. And to get that title shot against Mighty Mouse, you have to be able to do everything because he will not give you breath in one area. So I think he will get the title shot now. It's a matter of when, but we'll get to that fight another day. Mighty Mouse is a different animal when you're talking about coming from Formiga to Mighty Mouse.
Mm-hmm. And the co-main event of the evening at 145 pounds, Diego Sanchez against Ricardo Lamas. And first round, Lamas won. I think the speed of Lamas and the speed of the 45ers, I think, threw Diego off in the first round. Lamas also mixed in 2 takedowns there. Then in round 2, I thought Diego was starting to kind of figure things out. Then all of a sudden, that inside leg kick hit the calf hit from Lamas, and that pretty much took Diego out of the rest of the fight. It really affected his mobility, and obviously Lamas kind of continued going to the well, and then the third round, Diego could barely stand, and that allowed him to take a lot of punches and a lot of damage. And not the 145 debut we were thinking for Diego Sanchez, but a huge win for Ricardo Lamas. It puts him kind of right back into the title picture after losing to Chad Mendes a few months ago. And for Diego, I think one of the reasons maybe that calf kick was so successful, and we kind of brought it up when we mentioned Brandon Halsey there, people just think about your muscles and stuff like that, but it wears on your bones and joints. And when you cut that much weight like Diego did, and then you get hit in a spot that I think if this was at 55 or 170, it probably doesn't affect him, that kick. But just where it hit with the way he was drawn out and the weight, and I think that's, I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I think that's a kick that doesn't affect him that way if it's not at 145 pounds and he's reloading back up to 170 basically after the fight. I just think his body was still drawn out, still recovering, and I think that's a shot that affects him more because of all that weight. And wow, yeah, he hung in there as tough as he can. I don't think 145 being 33 and all the wars he's been in, I don't think that's such a good idea to try to stay and cut that much weight really anymore for him. I think if he's going to, I would say stick to 155 or heck move up to 170, but I don't think it was a valid effort, but I don't see 145 being the future for Diego Sanchez.
Yeah, for Diego, I had a lot of hopes and excitement coming into this fight. Maybe he'd be a little successful. We've seen it from Kenny Florian, who did the same thing. For Diego here at 33, all the wars he's been in these last couple fights, I think we're going to see Diego again. I think you stay at 155 and just take exciting fights. I mean, that's what he wants anyway at this point. I mean, even in this fight, the dude can barely walk. He's taking every shot on the chin, and he's just pounding his chest saying, come forward. I mean, you can't put this guy down. I'd like to see, I hope Kenny Florian comes out of retirement and they rematch at 155. Like, just something exciting and fun for Diego from here, because where do you go from here now?
Right, and also one thing, this was his first fight in over a year. He hadn't fought since beating Ross Pearson back in June of last year. Yeah. So let's not forget that too. He basically had a year off before taking this fight, and also I you got to attribute some ring rust there too. Another year older, like we said. So, yeah, I mean, again, valiant effort, but I just don't think 145 is the right fit for him.
Yeah, credit to Lamas too. I don't know if the speed definitely was huge for him. I mean, but he was landing shots. I mean, that inside kick was nasty. So Lamas looked really good, and it puts him right back in there in a clogged up division now. Mm-hmm. Like every division's pretty locked up.
The main event of the evening, Neil Magny against Calvin Gastelum. Very good fight between these two young guys here in the welterweight division, and this is really kind of the tale of two fights. Is the first round, Neil Magny was doing a great job of mixing in takedowns, got Gastelum in bad positions, came close to getting rear naked chokes, had them out, landed some damage, was doing a good job moving in and out. His reach and movement was proving to be a factor for Calvin Gastelum. And then the third round, I don't know if it was Magny just simply slowing down or Gastelum figuring out how to get inside that huge reach of Neil Magny, but he started to get inside, land some damage, and I thought also landed a takedown of his own in round number 3. Very close round 3. Round 4 was all Calvin Gastelum as he landed a couple big shots there on Magny, dropped him, outstruck him 24-6 in that frame. And then in the 5th round, had a takedown of his own. And really, I thought it was Magny just trying to pay keep away. He knew he was hurt, knew just had the last one round, and he could possibly, get this thing to a judge's scorecard where it was anybody's fight. And so he was trying to back off. Gastelum was still pushing the action as he once again outstruck Magny 27-17 in that round. I thought really solidified rounds 4 and 5. Magny had 1 and 2. Was really kind of how he scored round 3. And the judges were splitting on this one, and they ended up going with Neil Magny by split decision, getting 48-47 on 2 cards, 48-47 for Gastelum. And boy, very close fight. I actually would have gave Gastelum the 3rd round. I had him winning on my scorecard, but I see why the judges did go with Magny. But very close fight, and like I said, I believe on my Instagram afterwards, even though Gastelum lost, the fact that he made weight, went 5 rounds, still showed great energy, great power against a very tough guy in Neil Magny, I think is a step in the right direction for this young kid.
Yeah, if you look at my prediction, at least, I thought coming into this fight, past round 3 or even 2, that's where Magny steps away with this fight. Gastelum, the one we all talk about his conditioning for the weight cut, everything like that, he really walks away with a lot of wins. Like you said, he makes weight. Not only that, he's in round 5, and that's like his strongest round of the fight, 4 and 5. So really impressed for him. But I scored this fight for Magny. It all comes down to round 3, really. I think no one's going to argue that 1 and 2 goes to Magny and 4 and 5 goes to Gastelum here. I think he just edged out 3 a little bit. even 4, I think he looked nice. I don't know if Magny really was getting tired or it was just because he got rocked and he got caught. So who knows? But he got caught. He survives. And like you said, round 5, he kind of really knows, like, hey, I don't want to go too crazy. Even though there was a couple times where I think it was round 4, he's rocked, gets up, comes right forward, and gets dropped again. So he wasn't playing too much, but he played it safe enough to get the win here. And I think you give him 1 through 3 easy. I mean, his ground game looked really good. These guys were actually back and forth, just sweeping. And then his striking, obviously, he's kept that reach to use.
I think with this actually being an exciting Neil Magny fight, taking on short notice, winning the main event against one of the coaches there. Obviously, they were rooting for the guy of the Mexican heritage there in Monterrey and Kelvin Gastelum. So I think Neil Magny gets somebody like a Damian Maia, who we already fought not too long ago. I think he gets another big name sometime early next year. And if it's any indication of how Neil Magny's been going, it'll start off another at least 5, maybe even 6 fight a year for the man training out of Denver, Colorado.
They said he was trying to get a next month's card.
And they retake on Stephen Thompson.
This guy, he won't stop. I mean, I think he probably would have if he didn't get rocked in round 4. So all the credit in the world to Magny. I mean, you can't not like this guy as a fan. He steps up on late nights. He fights anyone. He fights all the time. I love Neil Magny, and I really hope he starts getting that exposure he deserves.
Yeah, Neil Magny's, when people talk about, the Reebok deal's paying you that much and stuff like that. Yeah, but if you fight 5 times in the year, you kind of make it worth it. And he proves, like, you want more money? Just fight more.
Yeah, go out there and
just fight, man.
That's Cowboys
don't
thing
worry,
too.
Yeah, don't worry about all that semantics with sponsors up. Just fight. Yeah, you'll get paid.
And he shows it.
All right, now we can get to UFC Fight Night 79 after covering UFC Fight Night 78. The first time the UFC will invade South Korea. This will be on the UFC Fight Pass starting November 28th. Of course, I'm going to have a link below in the description. We got to talk to one of the undercard fighters, Courtney Casey, who will be taking on Korea's Sohee Ham. That will be shown on the undercard there, so very excited to that. And also, this is a very interesting card because we have 2 fighters with the same exact name fighting on there. So if you're doing picks, make sure you pick who'll be fighting on the main card. Dong Hyun Kim, the one we actually know has been around for years, he'll be taking on Dominic Waters. And also very close, we have the other Dong Hyun Kim will be taking on Dominique Steele. Wait. So don't get these matchups twisted. You may get them confused when you're doing your picks or telling people like, yeah, did you see that Dong Hyun Kim fight? You got to be like, which one? Like against Dominic? You mean Dominique? So you got to be very specific. Here, they did not do us any favors here with the South Korean card.
I thought they were just gonna fight the first fight and then rematch later. That's kind of what I assumed. Dominique, Dong Hyun Kim. So
the winners of this fight, like Dominique Steele, if he wins, he should take on Dominic Waters, and then we should have the Dong Hyun Kims fight each other.
A little tournament of names.
Right.
There you go. What are you gonna do next, Bellator?
That is something that Bellator would do. Like looking at that, to have the names like that. Any more confusing.
They used to have that show like where the celebrity will switch spot with a normal person with the same name. The UFC would just have fighters fight people with the same name, or Bellator would. Scott Koch is a genius.
Oh, man. All right, let's get to the first fight of the evening at 145 pounds as Sam Sicilia will take on Du Hoi Choi, if I said that correctly.
Yes.
Looking at Choi, 12-1 so far in his career, 9 of 12 wins coming by way of knockout. He is so far 1-0 in the UFC as he knocked out Juan Puig in 18 seconds in his first UFC fight. However, that was about a year ago in Austin, Texas. So keep that in mind. So maybe, even though he's fighting in his home country here of Korea, a year layoff against the guy of Sam Sicilia, who has been on a roll as of late, winning 2 straight fights, one by knockout, one by decisions. He's took on as he defeated Meza back in San Diego earlier this year. With the knockouts, these guys, Sicilia 8 of 15 by way of knockouts, 17 knockouts between these two guys. I just think we're going to just see some bombs, and this is a perfect fight to open the card, and it'll be interesting to see who is left standing after all these bombs these two will be throwing at each other.
Yeah, this is a real exciting one to open up with. I mean, we're probably going to see a striking war, and if I'm going to give an edge on someone who has advantage, I'd like to say Cecilia's probably fought the better competition.
Mm-hmm.
Get 2 knockouts over Corsani, and with the Du Ho Choi, it's tough because when you come in there and get an 18-second knockout, you could have just caught the guy. We don't get to see a lot from you. So if I'm going to give it edges to Cecilia, but either way, this is the perfect way to open this card up. It's going to be exciting, and I don't want to give away my pick too much, but
yeah, it's going to be a fun fight. I'm looking. Sam Cecilia is a guy I don't think has ever disappointed so far since being in the UFC. So, very interested in seeing him. Speaking of making a return, the sexiest fighter in the UFC, Yoshihiro Akiyama, better known as Sexyama.
Excuse me?
Finally comes back. It's been over a year since we've seen Sexyama take out Amir Sadala back at the Hunt Nelson Japan card. He is now taking on relatively unknown fighter Alberto Mina, who is 11-0 in his career, all 11 wins by finish with 6 submissions and 5 knockouts. 1-0 so far in the UFCs. He took out Shinsizo Anazi, and that was over a year ago. That was on the China card, Michael Bisping against Kung Lee. So both guys have been out of action for a while. Mina is 33 years old. You could make a case he's taking on the best guy he's ever fought in his career here in Sexyama, who I believe is originally, I think has some ties to Korea as well. So very intriguing fight. Really, I'm really not sure what to expect because Sexyama is now 40 years old, year layoff. I understand he's fighting in Korea, so he's obviously going to be the favorite and what the crowd's going for. But with Mina being out a year as well and only having one fight in the UFC prior, it's really hard to get a gauge of what Mina's going to bring to the table against Akiyama. But I would imagine Mina wants to keep this thing standing and not try to get into a grappling match with the great judo practitioner in Sexyama.
Yeah, I'm going to think he wants to, but this is one of those fights where it's all questions for me. Like, what game does Mina bring when he's sort of unknown? And then Akiyama, after a year off at 40, what does he bring now, you know? So it's more questions than anything, but there's one thing for sure. Akiyama will show up beautiful. And that's hard for a lot of opponents to deal with.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And
when they lock eyes, they can't.
Right. Now, we know that Paige Van Zandt in her first fight was on the Fight Pass, and that was, I think, up until... I think still is the #1 viewed fight on the Fight Pass. I wonder how many female viewers will now flock to see the Akiyama fight. I wonder how many, like, the boost in sales they'll get from the Fight Pass, because, I mean, you got to see this guy fight, right? I mean, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see this fight get a huge shot up in the Fight Pass rankings.
If I'm being honest, Paige is in some trouble.
I think so.
I'm a dude, and I'm buying it for Akiyama. I'm getting Fight Pass for Akiyama.
Could you imagine if Paige Van Zandt and Akiyama fought on the same card?
Oh my God. Pound for pound.
And they were both on the poster?
Yeah, pound for pound, prettiest poster of all time.
Man, they sold out of that Van Zandt Akiyama poster quickly. How did that happen, man? They weren't even fighting. We just put them on the poster.
Yeah, they're not even. They're just there watching, but they need.
They were
to be
the
on
Q&A guests. They just threw. But serious question though, do you think win or lose this will be Akiyama's last fight?
I think it should be. I think especially if he goes out with a win in Korea, where do you go from here, Akiyama? I'm pretty sure he's like a superstar too. Japan, I'm pretty sure he's like not just a fighter. Like he's just.
Oh no, he does a lot of. I think he's like a singer. He's like a model. He's an actor. Yeah, he's married to a singer, model, actor. So
for Akiyama, he'll be all right. I think you go out here on a big win, and you're 40. You've had a good run in the UFC. I think that should be it for him.
All right, now the other Dong Hyun Kim, the one we all know for fighting in the UFC for many years, he will be taking on Dominic Shonuff Waters. Great nickname there.
I'm going to be picking a lot of fights based off names on this card.
He is 0-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to George Sullivan on the Tough 21 finale by unanimous decision. Of his 9 career victories, 4 are by decision. Looking at the stun gun, Dong Hyun Kim, 10 of his 20 wins are by decision. He has been overall a pretty good streak for him, as he has won 5 out of his last 6 fights. His only loss coming to Tyron Woodley really back impressive. In China. So far, his last fight, he submitted Josh Berkman in the 3rd round at UFC 187. Very impressive victory for him. So taking on Dominic Waters here, I think Waters has a chance, but Kim not only is fighting in his home country, he's probably the best fighter to ever come out of Korea. and he's taking on a guy that really doesn't even stack up to some of the guys he's fought. I mean, look at some of these guys Kim has fought. I mean, he's fought Matt Brown, Carl Parisian, TJ Grant, Nate Diaz, Carlos Condit, Damian Maia, Paulo Tiago, Eric Silva, John Hathaway, Tyron Woodley, and just beat Josh Bergman. I mean, he's fought a lot of tough guys, and no offense to Dominic Waters, but he's nowhere close to half those names I just named off.
I don't want to say this is a mismatch, but this is about as close as you're going to get. I mean, Dominic Waters comes in the UFC, loses his debut against an unknown, and then you got a guy who just fought the Tyron Woodley, takes a tough loss, but then goes on and beats Bergman. Just all the names he's fought, really. Let's be honest, I'm just talking of most recent, but really he's been fighting top 10 guys for the last
couple years.
How many years?
Right.
And the top of the top 10, we're talking top 5 even, like Condit, Diaz, Maia.
He's been in the UFC
and he's got
since 2008.
Wins over all these guys.
Yeah, he's beaten Matt Brown. He's beaten Nate Diaz. He beat Paulo Tiago. He beat Eric Silva.
Just, I feel like, I don't know, was there an injury that happened in this fight?
I
feel like there might have had to be, because just looking at their records, there's no way this fight matches up.
Yes, he was supposed to be taking on. No, that was Hung Yu Lim. Yeah, Dong-Hyun Kim gets replacement. This was as of November 16th. Kim was originally. He was actually supposed to take on Jorge Masvidal, who moved up for the injured Thiago Alves.
That makes a lot more sense. That's what I thought happened.
But still, it still gets to our point that, this is a guy that Kim should beat.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for Waters, he has everything to gain in this fight. I mean, he just goes out there and really swings for the fences on this one.
All right, and let's get to that main event. Like we said, Jorge Masvidal moving up to take on Ben Henderson here in the main event, where we have a matchup of two basically lightweight fighters, just not cutting as much weight here in the main event.
I like that better.
So we'll get to see probably the best of both guys. Ben Henderson, even though he's not from Korea, he is actually half Korean. His mother is originally from Korea, so he's probably going to be the favorite in this matchup for the crowd. Looking at his victories, 10 of his 22 career victories are by submission. Since moving up to 170, just the one win so far against Brandon Thatch. I think he was actually supposed to be taking on Michael Johnson earlier this year, but that didn't formulate, and now ends up fighting in the main event here. Take on Jorge Masvidal, who a very tough guy. Masvidal is one of these guys that I actually think is not like amazing in any one area, but he's tough. He's hard to finish. He has not been finished in several years. He's a decent grappler, decent striker, has some power. He has some submissions, and really he's just the guy that kind of sticks around in fights and has great conditioning. And I actually think that he's a huge test for Ben Henderson, whether it was at 155 or now at 170. It's really a fight of kind of who can get that edge early and find that weakness in their opponent. And I really think that's what it comes down to.
When trying to break down Masvidal, it's kind of just like you're saying. I mean, there's nowhere where you're like, you don't want to strike, you don't want to grip, but he's just tough everywhere, and he'll keep coming. I mean, I think the dude's been dropped in every fight I've seen him in, but he keeps winning. I mean, the dude just comes forward and he gets you, and I think he kind of breaks guys in that sense where you can throw everything at him, but he's going to keep coming at you.
Yeah, and for Ben Henderson, I would say the X factor to this fight will be if he can get it to the ground, which is easier said than done against Masvidal. Can he stay on top? Masvidal has a good job of, even if he gets taken down, of popping right back up. You look at a lot of his fights, even going back to his Strikeforce days, he's a hard guy to keep down. Standing, I would say Masvidal probably has a little more power. I mean, he's coming off that huge knockout victory over Cesar Fajeda. So if he can knock out a big dude like that, I got to believe he can knock out Ben Henderson. So knockout power, a little more edge there to Masvidal. But one thing Masvidal, I think, has only done once in his career, and that's go 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Where we know Ben Henderson, he did it so many times at 155 pounds. And looking over his record, the only time he went 5 rounds was actually in a loss for the Strikeforce title to Gilbert Melendez. And that was all the way back in 2011. So other than that, he hasn't even had a fight scheduled for 5 rounds. So that's another X factor too. Even though it's at 170, he doesn't have to cut much weight. But when you go into rounds and you're doing on things you're not used to, how does that affect you? Where Ben Henderson's clearly, he's gone into the 4th and 5th rounds so many times. I'd give him a slight edge if this thing does go into those fourth and fifth rounds.
Yeah, and Benson Henderson's style, I mean, he really wears on you because he's throwing every type of strike you can think of. He's just putting everything at you, and the later this thing goes, the worse it gets for Masvidal here. I think he does have the advantage in the power, like you're saying, but overall in striking, I think Benson will be able to edge him out a little bit. It's rather Masvidal can land that huge strike, and normally, it's weird not talking about Henderson because before I kind of looked at him as this, like, you're not going to knock Henderson out, but then Rafael sort of pulled that off, so you never know now. It makes it that more exciting.
Let's get to picks here for UFC Fight Night Seoul. First fight of the evening in the featherweight division, Sam Sicilia takes on Do Ho Choi. I'm going with Sam Sicilia. I don't like the year layoff there by Choi, and he's taking on the best guy he's ever fought in his career in Sicilia. So give me the man out of the Washington state.
Yeah, I think Sam Sicilia's just fought the tougher, and he's more tested opponent in this one, so I got to pick him.
All right, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm taking Sexyama over Alberto Mina. There's just no way. You almost probably never pick against Sexyama. Even if I should, I'm not. And I'm not going to do it here. I
wanted to pick against him, but then you clicked his picture, and there's not a chance that's happening. Akiyama wins this fight.
All right, Jung Hyun Kim against Dominic Waters. You know, they had to shuffle some things around. It's not as big a matchup as Kim taking on Masvidal. You know, credit to Dominic Waters for wanting to take on Jung Hyun Kim, but yeah, this is going to be the stun guns night. I mean, I'm sure he's been waiting this for a long time to fight in his home country of Korea, and I don't see him disappointing now.
Yes, I mean, we talked about it. This is sort of a mismatch. Stun guns fought everybody there is, and not only fought them, but beat them. And to fight a relatively unknown fighter, he should win this fight. Stun gun.
Ben Henderson against Jorge Masvidal for the main event. I think Masvidal, you know, you could say it's short notice, but I mean, he was training for a fight on this card. So really, he's not shifting too much. I mean, he trains with the guys down there in the American Top Team. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be prepared for this matchup. But it's just really hard to pick up against Ben Henderson. He just wins. That's just what this guy does. And man, it's really hard to pick against them. And of course, you know, even though he's not from Korea, he's going to have that. I think he's going to be very motivated to fight where he is half Korean. So I'm going to go with the smooth one, Benson Henderson, to get the victory.
This one's tough for me because every time I bet against Masvidal, this dude pulls it off. And I really think he does have a shot in this fight, and I think he can. But that being said, like you said, Benson Henderson just finds a way to get it done. I mean, the dude's a winner. He's been fighting the top dude. I mean, when you talk about fighters that'll fight anyone, any weight, anytime, Benson's just one of those guys, and I absolutely love it. The dude's, every fight you see injury, you see Benson's name on Twitter immediately like, hey, I'm your guy. So I love Benson. I think he takes this fight.
He is Billy Brant. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrant21. I am Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. For more Beyond the Cage, and of course to see our picks from our last fight, how we did, and of course our picks for this fight, just in case you want to see a list, go to facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, like our page, and check out what we got there for more information and questions and interactive stuff as well. So for Billy Brant, I am Jim Graham, and once again, I thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.